Hi, my name is Craig Bernardini. I'm the author of 12 OXEN Under the Sea, a short story collection that was published last year by New American Press. It is a finalist for the 2025 Big Other Fiction Prize. Thanks so much to John Madera and Big Other. I'm going to read a couple of short chapters from a longer story named Ambergris. It has 28 chapters, and I'm going to read chapter 14, and I think chapter 24 is the other one. It is set in the American Museum of Natural History in New York City. They used to come here every Sunday, he and his father. His mother had no interest, she said, in those old, dusty things. His father said there was nothing older and dustier than her goddamn church. Always to see the same old dusty things in the same order. The recovered fragment of the Willamette meteorite, the moon as it had appeared to the astronauts on the last Apollo voyage, the Earth with and without its oceans, the horse and its extinct relatives, mammals, African or North American, various, whales, blue in sperm. There were dozens of other exhibits he acknowledged in passing, genuflecting as necessary, T-Rex skull, woolly mammoth and mastodon, mosasaur, moz chops, oarfish, giant clam, etc. But there were only a few he was bound to pay his respects. The proper amount of time had to be spent with each. Only he could say how long. That was the best thing about coming. At the museum, time was his. As he finished at each station, he would turn to look at his father, and his father, if he was not too distracted with the paper or some pretty girl's stocking or some piece of foreign matter between his teeth, would say, "Ready?" But he was already walking, never running like the other children. He didn't need Father Esposito or Mrs. Ruane or any adult to tell him that, not even his father, trailing somewhere behind. He spent the biggest portion of the afternoon among the dioramas of mammals. At first, he had leaned over the wooden rails, his nose so near that it almost touched the glass, and sometimes did whap, always a shock, no matter how light the tap. Not that he was dozing, though his trance-like devotion may have appeared that way to an onlooker. Not like his father, seated on a bench nearby, one foot kicked forward with the toe of his shoe up. His father had given up trying to read the paper in the dim light of some savanna or mountain scene, folded it up on the bench beside him, and hands palm up in his lap, fingers laced, had fallen asleep, his light snore lost in the murmur, the manatee asleep above the seagrass. He took two steps back and paused, framed in the lighted glass of the diorama, like a projection of his father's dream. And the other chapter I'm going to read is 24. It's a little bit ahead, nearer to the end, and it kind of continues the same action. The most important thing was to stay absolutely still for longer than seemed humanly possible. Everything hinged on this. For most children his age, this was difficult. For him, simply unthinkable. Sparrow, his mother called him, chided him. But what kind? There were a number of different species of sparrow on display in the diorama of common northeastern birds in the Roosevelt Memorial Hall. He liked the Vesper sparrow best because of the way it sounded. For a long time, he had not understood the importance of immobility. He would pace like a fighter, goading his opponent in front of the glass, and then freeze suddenly, as if to surprise time and the apparent solidity of things. The idea of mimicking the animals, which to better project the illusion of life reposed in some representative behavior, the great horned owl carrying a meal to her younger, the grizzly cub shimmying up a spruce trunk, the blue-lit wolves suspended in motionless chase. That much made sense, but he had underestimated the time it would take. From this failed strategy of freezing in different places, he discovered that each diorama had a single ideal point from which it should be seen. The rear wall on which the surrounding landscape was painted curved around an implicit focus, like space curving around a center of gravity. To find it, he needed to step back a little. Pressing his face up to the glass just distorted the scene, like fish swimming along the window of an aquarium, though never so far that the diorama's frame or title would impinge too distinctly on the corners of his vision, or that some patron might feel invited to cross in front. It also mattered where he focused his attention. Over time, he discovered that the edge where the stage, on which the sculpted rocks and trees and taxidermied animals were mounted, met the curving wall and ceiling, on which landscape and sky were painted to create the illusion of space and distance, was often artfully hidden with tall grass or a cliff's edge. If he fixed his vision on that inferred edge for long enough, and then longer still, And all this supposing he had discovered the correct viewpoint. Then, at some point, the planes would merge. The distance was no longer an illusion, or the illusion was complete. The diorama suddenly turned into a window, as though the space represented the shore of Gunflint Lake, Minnesota. The plains of the Great Rift Valley had been drawn up against the museum the way landscapes are joined in a dream. And then one day, before the diorama of the great horned owl, he forgot everything. The placard explaining what it was he was looking at, with numbered outlines to identify flora and fauna, the opaque wall separating one diorama from the next, and the glass orifices of the adjacent windows bathing the dim light of the hall, the hard, even floor of the museum on which he stood until a moment before. The glass had dissolved, and he had passed through just as easily as his shadow once had when he had leaned close. His father was on the other side. He could tell because he could see the outline of his reflection on the glass and because the tree with the owl's nest appeared peripherally between them. The silence and stasis here were absolute. Not a leaf stirred. Even the water, though rippling, was still. And so long as he did not move, he was, like the owls unable to age, miraculously preserved and seemingly neither alive nor dead. He had the feeling somewhere between memory and a dream that his father was behind this, that he had built the whole frozen world around him. In a few moments, he would rise, pick up his paper, and shuffle slowly toward an exit, a guard pursuing him the whole way. He would be back again next week. He never missed a Sunday. But here, on this side of the glass, time moved much more slowly. Every moment was a mountain to be eroded away. He could have joined him, but that would have meant moving, and he was not yet ready to leave.